Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third installment of the Super Network Presents the King Zone podcast. And I am your lovely host, Super Marcey, or just Marcey, but I add the super because I'm super excellent. So hello, everyone, and welcome back. And with me, as always, is my trusty co-host and BFF, the terrible Australian Bede Jermyn. Hello, Bede.
Hello, Marcey. How are you?
I'm doing well, and how are you?
Oh, not too bad, thanks. It's been a bit of a busy time since the last time we recorded an episode. But so much has been happening, and just sort of been looking forward to today's episode because we're going to be talking about two films that I'm really excited to talk about in the Stephen King canon.
Yes, indeed. I am very interested to discuss these two movies, and I think what makes them a little bit more unique is they are anthologies, and we're talking, of course, about Creepshow and Creepshow 2. And so I don't get my facts wrong, Creepshow is from 1982 and Creepshow 2 is from 1987, just, to have those facts. So
Yes.
One was made before we were born, one was made after we were born, not showing our age whatsoever.
Exactly.
We are not alone. We have two returning guests who are now no longer virgins to our shenanigans. So congratulations. First, we'll introduce. Now I'm probably going to get the name wrong.
Like I said, you just say Matt K.
I'll just say Matt Konopka.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Woo! From Killer Horror Critic.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm very excited to talk some meteor shit with you guys.
I'm very excited to talk media shit. And our other guest is Rob Hunter, and I'm not going to screw this up, from Film School Rejects.
Yes! And I'd like to think that I'm still a virgin in the eyes of the Lord. But thank you otherwise.
Anyway, welcome back, guys. Great to have you back on the show, and very much appreciate your enthusiasm for talking all things Stephen King adaptations with Anthology, directed by one of my favorites, George A. Romero, and of course written by Stephen King. And this film has 5 different segments with like a little prologue and then epilogue at the end. It keeps in the vein of the old sort of horror comics. Like I think there's EC horror comics, stuff like that. So there's a bit of a sort of horror comic flavor around all the different stories, which I think is pretty cool. So with Creepshow, it consists of these 5 short movies. There's Father's Day, The Lonesome Death of Geordie Verrill, Something to Tide You Over, The Crate, and They're Creeping Up on You. I believe 2 stories were adapted from Stephen King's short stories. And fun note, in the prologue and epilogue, the young boy is actually played by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son and also a very successful author.
Indeed.
Yes.
Thought I'd add that in there. So Creepshow actually has a really cool cast for all these films. So you'll see the likes of Ted Danson, Leslie Nielsen. There is an Ed Harris in there. Hal Holbrook, Adrian Barbeau. So there's all sorts of really cool actors and actresses in there. And actually not the only time Romero and King have collaborated, which is also pretty cool, I might add. One of the other movies we'll be talking about on another podcast.
Yes.
So I guess I'll just kick things off with Creepshow. So I actually first watched Creepshow a few years ago when I was writing a column about George Romero. So I decided to go through his entire filmography and watch the things I hadn't seen. And I really, really enjoyed it. And upon rewatch, I still really enjoyed it. All the stories are very different. They all have like a really different feel, but there is this core sort of element about them that sort of keeps them I guess, connected in a way, but they're still very different. I think some are stronger than others. I do have my personal favorite, which we'll get into a bit later. But overall, I find the original Creepshow to be a really entertaining watch. And I mean, for something with 5 short stories or 5 short movies with a running time of 2 hours, it actually goes by really, really quickly. Bede, do you want to share your quick thoughts first up on this one?
Yeah, sure. I love Creepshow. I remember seeing it for the first time a couple years back, and I really enjoyed it. But when I rewatched it again in preparation for this show, I loved it even more. And for me, it's definitely, without a doubt, kind of the high mark in terms of horror anthologies, because this is kind of, for me, one of the rare ones where usually with a lot of anthology films, you'll always have stories that are kind of they're always usually a mixed bag, because you got stories that are sort of really great, but others are just kind of bad or mediocre. But for me, this is one of the rare occasions where every story is strong and works in their own way. And they do have the sort of core elements between them, like thematic, sort of theme-wise, in which sort of, like you said, Marcey, kind of connect them all together. But how George A. Romero and Stephen King sort of approach each story is that they have their own specific tone and feel. Like, some of them are definitely played for more sort of for laughs, others are played for straight-on scares. And also, it has that great sort of comic book feel to it. Like, at certain points throughout the whole film, when characters are in a sort of a very scary situation, the film gets very stylized and very colorful, and lots of blues and reds that kind of reflect the pages of EC Comics. And to me, it just really captures that comic book vibe. But like you said, for a film that goes for 2 hours, it goes by so fast, and also the cast are all great. It's just a really fun and entertaining anthology film.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Rob, what about your quick thoughts on Creepshow?
Unsurprisingly, I'm also a fan. I love horror anthology movies in general, like across the board. I just love horror anthology movies. I've always been a huge fan of horror short stories, and so my bookshelves were always lined with, horror collections, story collections. So anthology movies are kind of like part and parcel with that. And to that end, Creepshow is definitely like up there. It's probably like in my top 3 horror anthologies, I'd say. It has kind of, better than any other movie of this type. It has a really good handle on its theme and on its kind of conceit. Like you mentioned, the EC Comics. So from beginning to end, it really embodies those EC Comics, with these tales of, revenge and, over the top reactions and, occasional creature features. And like Bede had said, it really uses also the pages of the comics to help bring the movies to life. So you get a little bit of the animation in there, but you've also got scenes like in Father's Day and in The Crate that we'll get to. But I mean, where, the characters have like a reaction shot, and so the background behind them kind of changes to like a primary color with some like lightning bolts or something to kind of show the reaction, which is essentially a panel in a comic book. So it really embraces that. It delivers a lot of fun across the different stories, and then ends on a high note. So yeah, it's definitely one of the best of this type of movie.
And Matt, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm also a huge fan. This is actually one of my favorite horror films by one of my favorite directors. Rest in peace, Romero. And just like you guys are saying, I love the comic book aspect of this. It's very stylish. It really captures what EC Comics and William Gaines did. And I also love anthology films. There's a little something for everybody in these films. And like Bede had mentioned, with Creepshow, it kind of feels like they're all firing on all cylinders instead of being more of a mixed bag.